The silence was the first thing that felt wrong. Our house, Blackwood Manor, was never truly silent. It was a grand, aging beast of a place, a relic of a past fortune my father, Richard Sterling, clung to with white-knuckled desperation. His bones groaned. The wind, snaking through the ancient oaks that stood sentinel around the property, always seemed to be whispering secrets against the leaded glass windows. My mother, Eleanor, filled the remaining spaces with the clatter of her porcelain teacups, the rustle of her silk blouses, and the quiet, constant hum of her anxiety. But on that Tuesday morning in October, the silence was a physical presence. It was heavy, suffocating, a blanket of nothing that had smothered the house's usual murmurs. I'd woken late, the pale autumn light filtering weakly through my bedroom window. My first thought was of Leo. My brother was the antithesis of silence. He was a symphony of chaos, the thud of his boots on the polished oak floors, the blast of some obscure indie band from his room, the booming laughter that could fill the entire East Wing. His absence was not just a lack of sound. It was a void. I pushed myself out of bed, my feet cold on the floorboards, and went to his room first. The door was slightly ajar. I nudged it open. The bed was made, or rather, it was stripped, the mattress bare save for a single, folded gray sheet. Leo never made his bed. He claimed it was a futile endeavor, an admission of defeat to the day before it had even begun. His guitar, a vintage Gibson he treasured more than anything, was gone from its stand. His leather jacket, practically a second skin, wasn't slung over its customary chair. The air in the room was stale, still. He hadn't slept there. A knot of unease, cold and tight, formed in my stomach. I called his name. Leo? The only answer was the house's oppressive quiet. I checked the rest of the upstairs. My parents' room was empty, their bed neatly made. I descended the grand, curving staircase, my hand trailing along the smooth, cool wood of the balustrade. The formal living room was pristine, untouched. The dining room table was set for a breakfast that had never happened. In the kitchen, the Aga stove was cold. My mother's prized orchids drooped in the window, unwatered. It was then that I saw them. My parents were in my father's study, a room of dark wood, leather-bound books, and the faint, persistent smell of expensive scotch. The door was closed, but I could hear their voices, not loud, but sharp, staccato bursts of sound that sliced through the silence. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the wrongness of the morning held me captive. Can't just call them, Richard. Think of the optics. Sterling Air vanishes. It will be a media circus. It will ruin us. My mother's voice was a high-pitched, frantic whisper. What would you have me do, Eleanor? Wait. He's been gone for over 24 hours. His car is still in the garage. His phone goes straight to voicemail. This isn't one of his usual escapades. My father's voice was a low growl, laced with a frustration so profound it bordered on fury. He's being dramatic. He was upset after your discussion. He's gone to blow off steam. He'll be back. He wouldn't leave his guitar, my father said, and the finality in his tone sent a chill down my spine. He was right. Leo would sooner leave a limb behind. I couldn't listen anymore. I felt like an intruder in my own home, a spectator to a drama whose first act I had missed. I retreated back up the stairs, my heart thumping a panicked rhythm against my ribs. My brother was gone. Not just out for the night, but gone. And my parents' first reaction wasn't fear for his safety, but fear for the family's reputation. A family scandal. The phrase echoed in my mind, a harbinger of something ugly. I walked back into my own room, the familiar space now feeling alien and unsafe. I needed to think, to piece together the fragments of the last few days. And that's when I saw it. Lying stark and white against the deep blue of my pillowcase was a single, folded piece of paper. It wasn't there when I woke up. I would have noticed. My heart lurched. Someone had been in my room while I was downstairs. My mother? My father? My hand trembled as I picked it up. It was a page torn from a sketchbook, the thick, textured paper familiar. It was Leo's. I unfolded it. The handwriting was his, a frantic, spidery scrawl so different from his usual confident script. The words were few, but they landed like blows. Alex, he's not who you think he is. The Raven knows. Don't trust them. He's not who you think he is. My mind immediately jumped to our father. The discussion my mother had mentioned. Leo and my father had been at odds for months. My father, a titan of corporate law, had meticulously planned out Leo's life. The right university, the right internship, a partnership at the firm waiting for him. Leo, a wild-hearted artist and musician, wanted none of it. Their arguments had become more frequent, more venomous. The Raven knows. What did that mean? A person? A place? A code? It was nonsensical, the kind of cryptic clue from a bad detective novel. Don't trust them. Plural. Not just him. Them. My father and my mother. I sank onto my bed, the note clutched in my hand. The silence of the house was no longer just an absence of sound. It was the sound of a secret. A vast, terrible secret that had swallowed my brother whole. The note wasn't a goodbye. It was a warning. And it was a breadcrumb. I had to retrace his steps. The last time I'd truly spoken to him was 2 nights ago. He'd found me in the library, where I was cataloging some of our grandfather's first editions. I was the quiet one, the archivist, the keeper of our family's history. Alex, the steady rock, while Leo was the glorious, unpredictable meteor. He had seemed agitated that night, his usual vibrant energy curdled into a kind of frantic paranoia. He paced the length of the room, running a hand through his already messy dark hair. You ever feel like this whole house is built on a lie, Alex? He'd asked, his voice low. I think it's built on our great-grandfather's railroad money, mostly, I'd replied, trying for levity. He didn't smile. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes dark and serious. No, I mean it. Like, the foundations are rotten. Like one good push and the whole thing comes down. What's this about, Leo? Another fight with Dad? He'd flinched at the mention of our father. It's always about Dad, isn't it? He'd laughed then, a short, bitter sound. You know, I was looking through some of Granddad's old stuff. Up in the attic. You find the most interesting things up there. Old tax records and moth-eaten coats? I'd asked. Sometimes, he'd said, his gaze distant. And sometimes you find things you're not supposed to see. Things people thought were buried for good. He had leaned in close then, his voice dropping to a whisper that prickled the hairs on my arm. His last words haunt me to this day. He'd said it with such chilling gravity that I was momentarily speechless. But who was he? He didn't elaborate. He just straightened up, a shadow passing over his face. Some things, once you see them, you can't unsee, Alex. Some truths are poison. Be careful who you trust. He had left then, leaving me unsettled and confused. I dismissed it as hyperbole, another dramatic flourish from my theatrical brother. Now his words returned to me laced with a new and terrifying meaning. Some truths are poison. He had found something in the attic. Something that made him fear our father. Something that made him run. My path was clear. I had to go to the attic. I hid the note in the hollowed-out copy of Moby Dick where I kept my emergency cash. I walked out of my room and found my mother in the hallway dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Alex, darling, she said, her voice brittle. Your brother, he's just gone on one of his trips. You know how he is. Impulsive. His car is in the garage, Mom. And his guitar is gone. I said, my voice flat, testing her. A flicker of panic in her eyes, quickly masked. He must have had a friend pick him up. You know, Leo always has a legion of admirers willing to chauffeur him around. She was creating the narrative, the acceptable story we would tell the world. The scandal was being contained. I'm going to look for him, I said. Don't be ridiculous, Alex, my father's voice boomed from the doorway of his study. He stood there, a monolith of tailored tweed and disapproval. We will handle this. It is a private family matter. You will go about your day as normal. We need to present a unified, untroubled front. Don't trust them. Leo's words screamed in my head. Of course, Father, I said, my voice a mask of compliance. I was just going up to the library. He gave me a long, scrutinizing look, his eyes like chips of granite. He was searching for something, defiance, suspicion. I held his gaze, keeping my own face a blank canvas. After a moment, he gave a curt nod and retreated back into his study, closing the door with a definitive click. My mother gave me a watery, pleading smile and drifted away down the hall. They were liars. They were acting. And I was now part of the performance. I bypassed the library and went straight to the end of the upstairs corridor, to the narrow, unassuming door that led to the attic stairs. The air grew colder as I ascended the creaking steps. The attic spanned the entire length of the house, a cavern of forgotten history. It smelled of dust, cedar, and time itself. Draped furniture looked like sleeping ghosts under white sheets. Piles of trunks and boxes formed precarious towers. Sunlight streamed in through a single grimy circular window at the far end, illuminating dancing dust motes. Where to even begin? I thought back to Leo's words. Granddad's old stuff. Our grandfather, Arthur Sterling, had been a very different man from my father. He was a historian, a collector of oddities. His domain in the attic was a corner piled high with old leather trunks and wooden crates marked with his elegant, looping script. I started there, pulling down crates, the dust making me sneeze. I opened them to find meticulously labeled collections, Victorian medical instruments, antique maps, a box of letters from the Second World War. It was fascinating, but it wasn't a poison truth. I was looking for something out of place, something that would have caught Leo's eye. After nearly an hour of fruitless searching, my hands black with grime, I was about to give up. I sat down on a large, leather-bound steamer trunk to catch my breath. The leather was cracked and dry. One of the brass latches was broken. On a whim, I tried the other. It sprang open. The lid was heavy, and I heaved it back on its creaking hinges. The trunk was filled with my grandfather's academic papers and research notes. But underneath a stack of files on 18th-century trade routes, there was something else. A smaller, flat, metal box. It was locked with a simple key lock. I rattled it. Something slid around inside. This was it. I could feel it. I searched the surrounding crates for a key, but found nothing. Frustration mounted. I looked around for something to pry it open with, and my eyes landed on a rusty old crowbar leaning against a support beam. It took a few tries, the metal groaning in protest, but I managed to wedge the end of the crowbar under the lid and force it. The lock snapped with a sharp crack that echoed in the vast silence. My heart hammered as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed velvet, was not a diary or a weapon or a bundle of incriminating letters. It was a collection of old photographs and a single, leather-bound sketchbook smaller than the kind Leo usually used. I picked up the sketchbook first. The cover was worn, the leather soft with age. It wasn't Leo's. It wasn't my grandfather's. I opened it to the first page. The drawings were exquisite, detailed anatomical studies of birds. Crows, magpies, jays, and ravens. Page after page of ravens drawn in charcoal with an almost obsessive precision. On the last page, there was a sketch of a building, a small, rustic, A-frame cabin by a lake surrounded by pine trees. Underneath it, 2 words were written. The Raven's Roost. My breath caught. The Raven knows. It wasn't a person. It was a place. I knew that cabin. It was a derelict hunting lodge on the far side of Miller's Lake, on a piece of land the family had sold off decades ago. We used to hike out there as kids, daring each other to go inside the spooky, abandoned building we'd nicknamed the Raven's Roost because of the huge flock that always seemed to be circling it. I turned my attention to the photographs. They were old, black and white, from the late 1980s. The first few were of my father, much younger, his face leaner, his smile less practiced. He was with another man I didn't recognize. They were on a boat, laughing, holding up a large fish. They looked like the best of friends. In another photo, they were standing with their arms around each other outside what looked like the beginnings of a construction site. Then the photos changed. There were newspaper clippings carefully cut out and preserved. The headline of the largest one read, "Local entrepreneur dies in tragic boating accident." My blood ran cold. The man in the photograph, the smiling man on the boat with my father, was named Michael Corrigan. He had drowned in Miller's Lake. His body had been recovered, but the boat was never found. It was ruled an accident. A terrible tragedy. There was one last photo at the bottom of the box. It was of the same 2 men, my father and Michael Corrigan, but this one was different. It wasn't a happy holiday snap. They were standing in front of the Raven's Roost cabin. They weren't smiling. My father's hand was on Corrigan's shoulder, but it didn't look friendly. It looked possessive, menacing. Corrigan looked strained, his eyes shadowed with something that looked like fear. A story began to form in my mind, a dark and terrifying narrative. A business partnership. A boating accident. A secret hidden in an old trunk. Leo had found this box. He had seen these photos. He had put the pieces together. And he had understood that the official story was a lie. He's not who you think he is. My father wasn't just a stern, ambitious man. He was a man with a past that involved the convenient death of his business partner. The family fortune, the manor, the life my mother was so desperate to protect, was it all built on that death? Was that the poison truth Leo had uncovered? The pieces were clicking into place, but one was still missing. The sketchbook. Who did it belong to? Why was it in the box with the photos of Michael Corrigan? The art style was masterful but unsettling. The obsession with ravens. I had to get out of the attic. I had to get out of the house. I carefully put everything back in the metal box, wedged the broken lid shut, and hid it back in the trunk, covering it exactly as I'd found it. My mind was racing. I couldn't confront my parents. Not yet. Not without knowing more. Leo's warning, "Don't trust them," was a shield. They would lie, they would gaslight me, they would close ranks. I needed to go to the source. I had to find out who the sketchbook belonged to, and I had to go to the Raven's Roost. Leo's note wasn't just a warning, it was a map. He was telling me where to look. Maybe he had gone there himself. Maybe he had left something else for me there. Something that would explain everything. I crept back downstairs. The house was still quiet. I grabbed my car keys, my wallet, and a heavy-duty flashlight from the utility closet. I scribbled a quick, vague note for my parents and left it on the kitchen counter, gone to the university library to do some research. Might stay with a friend tonight. Don't wait up. It was a flimsy lie, but it would buy me time. As I walked to the garage, I felt a profound shift inside me. The Alex who had woken up this morning was gone. That Alex believed in the sturdiness of his family, in the benign if overbearing nature of his parents, in the unshakable if chaotic presence of his brother. That Alex was naive. The new Alex, the one starting the engine of his car and pulling out of the long, gravel driveway, was a stranger. He was a boy who suspected his father was a killer, his mother an accomplice, and his brother a fugitive from a truth that could destroy them all. I drove away from Blackwood Manor, the grand house shrinking in my rearview mirror until it was just a silhouette against the gray sky. I was driving toward an abandoned cabin and a 25-year-old mystery. I was following the ghost of my brother. The scandal my mother feared was no longer a vague threat. It was my reality. And as I drove, the last words Leo had spoken to me echoed in my mind, no longer a piece of dramatic flair, but a chilling, terrifying prophecy. Some truths are poison. I was about to drink deep from the cup. My investigation had to be methodical. Leo was impulsive, but he was also smart. He wouldn't have just run blindly. He would have a plan. The cryptic note was phase 1. The Raven's Roost was phase 2. Before I headed out to the lake, I needed more context. The name from the newspaper clipping, Michael Corrigan, was my only lead. I drove into town, bypassing the road that led to the lake. The town library was a small, brick building, a world away from my family's private, mahogany-paneled collection. It was my territory, in a way. I was comfortable here among the quiet stacks and the gentle rustle of turning pages. Mrs. Gable, the head librarian who had known me since I was a boy, gave me a warm smile from behind the checkout desk. "Alex, dear, I haven't seen you in a while." Slumming it with us common folk, she teased. "You know I prefer your selection of mystery novels to my grandfather's dusty old tomes." I lied easily. "I'm actually here for some local history. Do you have archived town newspapers on microfiche? From the late 80s? "Of course. Right this way. Researching a school paper." "Something like that," I said. She set me up at a clunky old microfiche reader in a quiet corner. The machine hummed and whirred as I scrolled through the reels, the black and white pages of the past flashing before my eyes. I found the year I was looking for, 1988. I scrolled through the months. August. September. And there it was. October 12, 1988. The article about Michael Corrigan's death was more detailed than the clipping in the box. He was 28 years old, a promising architect who had recently gone into partnership with my father, Richard Sterling. Their new firm, Sterling and Corrigan Developments, had just broken ground on their first major project, a luxury lakeside housing community. The very community that now stood on the shores of Miller's Lake, the source of the new money that had propped up my family's fading ancestral fortune. According to the article, Corrigan had taken his small speedboat out on the lake for an evening fishing trip and never returned. A storm had rolled in unexpectedly. His empty boat was found washed ashore the next morning, but his body wasn't discovered for 3 days. My father was quoted extensively in the article. His words were a performance of grief. "I've lost more than a business partner. I've lost a brother," Richard Sterling had told the reporter, his voice thick with emotion. Michael was a visionary, the brightest talent I've ever known. This community was his dream. I will see it completed. It will be his legacy. It was nauseatingly perfect. The grieving friend, the vow to carry on his fallen partner's legacy. A legacy from which my father had profited immensely. Sterling and Corrigan Developments had become simply Sterling Properties. I kept scrolling. A few days later, a follow-up piece. An interview with Corrigan's grieving fiancée, a young artist named Isabella Vance. She was heartbroken, confused. She mentioned that Michael had been stressed lately, working long hours, arguing with my father over creative differences, and financial projections. The reporter framed it as the natural stress of a new business venture. But I saw it through a different lens. Isabella Vance, an artist. My mind flew to the sketchbook in the box. The masterful drawings of ravens. Could it have been hers? I did a quick search for her name in the library's database. I found a few mentions in local art show reviews from the early 90s, and then nothing. It was like she, too, had vanished. A new objective formed. Find Isabella Vance. She was the only other living person besides my parents who was connected to that time to Michael Corrigan. She might have answers. But she was a ghost. My primary mission was still the Raven's Roost. It was late afternoon now, the sky beginning to bruise with the colors of sunset. The drive out to Miller's Lake was filled with a growing sense of dread. The luxury homes my father had built lined one side of the shore, their large windows glowing with warm, inviting light. They were monuments to a lie. The road to the old cabin was on the opposite side of the lake. It was unpaved, overgrown. My car bounced and scraped along the rutted track. The trees pressed in close, their branches like skeletal fingers scratching at the windows. When the track became impassable, I got out and continued on foot, my flashlight cutting a nervous beam through the deepening twilight. The air was cold and smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves. And then I saw it. The A-frame cabin stood in a small clearing, a dark triangle against the sky. It looked even more menacing than I remembered from my childhood. The wood was gray and weathered, the porch was sagging, and one of the windows was a gaping black hole of shattered glass. A flock of ravens roost in the high pines surrounding it, their guttural calls echoing in the stillness. It was a place secrets would come to die. I pushed open the groaning door and stepped inside. The interior was one large room, thick with dust and cobwebs. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A dilapidated table and 2 chairs stood in the center. Moonlight streamed through the broken window, illuminating the thick layer of dust on the floor. And in that dust, there were footprints. They weren't old. They were fresh. 2 sets. One set was from heavy boots like the kind Leo wore. The other was fainter, from a different type of shoe. My heart leaped. He had been here. He wasn't alone. I swept my flashlight beam around the room. Leo's impulsiveness was a front for a clever mind. He wouldn't have left a clue out in the open. I thought about our childhood games here, the secret hiding places we had. There was a loose stone in the hearth behind which we used to hide treasured marbles, pocket knives, a forbidden pack of cigarettes. I knelt by the fireplace, my fingers searching for the familiar rough edge of the stone. I found it and it wiggled under my touch. I pulled it free. In the dark cavity behind it, my fingers brushed against a small, plastic object. A USB flash drive. I stared at it, a tiny piece of black plastic that felt heavier than an anchor. This was it. This was the poison. Leo had digitized whatever he'd found, creating a modern copy of an old secret. He'd brought it here to our place and left it for me. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest, flashlight beam jerking wildly. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the last of the fading light. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered. For one wild, hopeful second, I thought it was Leo. But the voice that spoke was not my brother's. It was cold, flat, and unfamiliar. "You shouldn't have come here, Alex." My blood turned to ice. He knew my name. The man stepped out of the silhouette and into the weak moonlight filtering through the grimy windows. He wasn't my brother. He was older, maybe in his early 50s, with a weathered face, close-cropped gray hair, and the weary, watchful eyes of a man who had seen too much. He was dressed in practical, dark clothing, a worn field jacket, jeans, and sturdy boots. The second set of footprints. He wasn't threatening, not overtly, but his presence was an immovable object in the small, decaying cabin. My hand tightened around the flash drive in my pocket, the plastic edges digging into my palm. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice sounding thin and reedy to my own ears. I kept the flashlight beam trained on his face, a pathetic attempt at defense. He didn't flinch from the light. "My name is not important. What's important is that you're in a place you don't belong, looking for things you shouldn't be looking for." "I'm looking for my brother, Leo," I said, a wave of defiance washing over the fear. "He was here. I saw his footprints." The man's expression softened just for a second, a flicker of something like pity in his eyes. "Yes, he was here. I met with him." The admission hung in the air between us. "You helped him? Do you know where he is?" The questions tumbled out desperate and raw. "I helped him get a head start," the man said carefully. "And as for where he is, the less you know, the safer you both are." He wanted it that way. Safer from whom? The answer was a cold stone in my gut. Safer from our father. "My brother left me a note," I said, pressing on, testing him. "He told me to come here. He left this for me." I held up the flash drive. The man nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the small device. He was afraid something might happen to him. "He wanted you to have the insurance policy. He trusted you, Alex. Said you were the smart one, the one who would know what to do." The words were a strange comfort and a heavy burden. Leo's faith in me was a weight I wasn't sure I could bear. "What's on it?" I asked, though I already suspected. "What did he find?" The man hesitated, studying my face as if trying to gauge my strength. "He found the truth your father buried a long time ago. He found out what really happened to Michael Corrigan." "He was murdered," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "By my father." It wasn't a question. Saying it aloud in this rotting cabin that reeked of secrets made it real. The man didn't confirm or deny it. He simply said, "The story is more complicated than that. But your father is a dangerous man. He built an empire on a grave, and he will do anything to protect it." Leo understood that. That's why he ran. "And you?" I asked. "Who are you in this story?" He looked away toward the black, gaping maw of the stone fireplace. "I'm a ghost. Just like Michael Corrigan. Let's just say I have a vested interest in seeing Richard Sterling get what he deserves. I knew Michael. And I knew his fiancée, Isabella." My breath hitched. "Isabella Vance. The artist. Is she?" "She's alive," he said. And the relief that washed over me was as surprising as it was profound. "She's safe. She's been in hiding for a long, long time. After Michael died, your father didn't just take over the business. He tried to take over her life. He was obsessed. She knew something was wrong about Michael's death. She started asking questions. Your father made her life a living hell until she disappeared. He thought she was dead. It was better that way. The sketchbook. The obsessive drawings of ravens. The sketchbook in the box, it was hers," I whispered. "Yes," the man confirmed. "Your grandfather, Arthur, found it. He found her. Arthur was a good man. He suspected his own son, but he couldn't prove anything. He helped Isabella vanish, and he kept that box hidden, hoping that one day the truth would come out. He never trusted Richard after that. This was the family scandal. Not just a murder, but a deep generational rot. My grandfather suspecting his own son. My father, a monster hiding in plain sight, his hands stained with blood and obsession. My mother, the silent partner, polishing the silver while the foundations of their life crumbled into dust. You need to leave. Now, the man said, his voice urgent, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. Your father is not a man who sits and waits. When he realized Leo was truly gone, he would have started tracking him. He has resources, people everywhere. He might even know about this place. Leo and I were careful, but we're not infallible. He was right. Staying here was a risk. I had what I came for. How do I find Leo? You don't, the man said firmly. Not yet. He will contact you when it's safe. For now, your job is to protect that drive. Get it somewhere safe, make copies. It's your only leverage. It's the only thing keeping you alive right now. He was right. I clutched the drive and backed toward the door. Thank you, I said, the words inadequate. Go, he urged. And Alex? Be the smart one. Don't let your father see the truth in your eyes. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping at my face, my lungs burning. I didn't stop until I was back in my car, locking the doors, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The drive back to Blackwood Manor was a journey through a nightmare. Every pair of headlights in my rearview mirror was my father's hired muscle. Every shadow on the side of the road was a threat. The man in the cabin was right. My father was not a passive man. The hunt would be on. I couldn't go home. Not yet. I drove to the 24-hour library at the university, my supposed destination. The fluorescent lights and the quiet hum of students studying felt like a different universe. I found an empty computer Corel and plugged in the flash drive, my hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries. A single folder appeared on the screen. It was labeled Legacy. I clicked it open. It was a meticulously organized collection of files. There were high-resolution scans of all the photos and clippings I'd seen in the box. There were scans of every page of Isabella Vance's Raven sketchbook. But there was more. So much more. Leo, or perhaps the man in the cabin, had been thorough. There was a detailed financial analysis tracing how funds were diverted from the Sterling and Corrigan Company accounts into a private offshore account in my father's name, starting a week before Michael Corrigan's death. It was a clear motive. My father was robbing his partner blind and was about to be found out. Then I found the audio files. My blood ran cold. The file names were just dates. I clicked on the first one. My father's voice filled my headphones, tinny and distorted, clearly recorded covertly. He was arguing with Leo. It must have been the discussion my mother had mentioned. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're a child, playing with things you don't understand. My father roared. I understand that you murdered a man. Leo's voice shot back, filled with a righteous fury I had never heard from him before. I found the box, Dad. Granddad's box. I saw the pictures. I read about Michael Corrigan. You killed him and you stole his company. There was a long, chilling silence. Then my father's voice, no longer yelling but dropping to a low, venomous whisper. That company has paid for your entire pampered life. It paid for your expensive guitars, your aimless travels, your pathetic artistic pretensions. It paid for this house. Paid for your mother's sanity. You live and breathe because of what I did. Michael was a weakness. He would have dragged us all down. I did what was necessary to protect this family. This isn't a family. Leo's voice was broken, full of disgust. It's a mausoleum. And you're the monster haunting it. You will give me what you found, my father commanded. You will forget this. You will go to law school and you will take your place at the firm and you will be grateful. Or I will make you disappear just like I made Isabella Vance disappear. The threat was naked, unambiguous. It wasn't just a confession, it was a promise. He would hurt his own son to protect his secret. My hands were trembling. I was listening to the motive for my brother's vanishing. Leo hadn't just run away. He had been threatened with death by his own father. There was one last file. A password-protected video file. The password hint was a single word, Raven. I typed it in and the video opened. It wasn't a modern video. It was grainy, digitized from an old VHS tape. The timestamp in the corner read October 11th, 1988, the night Michael Corrigan died. The camera was stationary, looking out from a window, through trees, towards a small dock on Miller's Lake. It was filmed from the Raven's Roost. Isabella must have set it up. Maybe she was already suspicious. Maybe she just wanted to film the storm. The storm was rolling in, the sky dark, the water choppy. A small speedboat was tied to the dock. 2 figures walked down to it. My father and Michael Corrigan. They were arguing, their gestures sharp and angry even from a distance. They got into the boat. My father took the controls. He didn't untie the boat, instead he started the engine and let it idle, the sound drowned out by the rising wind. They stood facing each other. My father grabbed Michael. It wasn't a friendly gesture. They struggled. Michael pushed him away. Then my father lunged. It was fast, brutal. He shoved Michael with all his might. Michael, caught off balance, stumbled backward, his arms flailing, and pitched over the side into the churning, dark water. He surfaced once, his head bobbing, his arm reaching out. My father just stood there on the boat, watching. He didn't throw him a life preserver. He didn't call for help. He just watched as his partner, his brother, struggled and then slipped beneath the waves for the last time. Then, calmly, my father cut the ropes, sent the boat drifting out into the lake, and walked back up the dock, disappearing from the frame. I ripped the headphones from my ears, a strangled gasp escaping my lips. I felt sick. I stumbled to the men's room and retched into the sink, my body convulsing with the horror of what I'd seen. The detached, clinical way my father had watched a man die. The cold, calculated evil. This was the poison truth. And now it was inside me. I made 3 copies of the flash drive. I mailed one to a secure P.O. box I'd set up years ago for my writing. I uploaded the entire contents to a heavily encrypted cloud server with a dead man's switch set to email the entire file to the state police and 3 major news outlets if I didn't log in every 48 hours. The 3rd copy I put in my pocket. Insurance. Leverage. The only thing keeping me alive. It was nearly dawn when I finally drove home. The house was dark, sleeping under its blanket of lies. I let myself in as quietly as I could. I needed one more thing. I went to my father's study, the place where he had threatened my brother, the room where he held court. I jimmied the lock with a credit card, a skill Leo had taught me for far more innocent purposes. The room smelled of scotch and power. His desk was immaculate. In the top drawer, beneath a stack of legal pads, was his checkbook. I didn't take it. I just looked at it. The name printed on the checks. Richard Sterling. Sterling Properties. It was all paid for in blood. I went back to my room and sat on my bed the same way I had just 24 hours ago when this nightmare began. The note was gone from my pillow, but its message was seared into my soul. My brother was vanished. The family scandal was a chasm that had opened beneath my feet. And the secret was a monster I now had to live with. The sun came up. I heard the house stir. The soft footsteps of my mother. The heavier tread of my father. I heard the clink of teacups. The pretense of normalcy. I walked downstairs. They were in the breakfast nook, the morning sun glinting off the silver. They looked up as I entered. My mother's face was a mask of strained relief. "Alex. Darling, you're back." We were so worried. My father lowered his newspaper. His eyes, those cold granite chips, assessed me. He was looking for the truth in my eyes, just as the man in the cabin had warned. "I was at the library," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I was an actor now, too. Got a lot of work done." "Good," my father said, a hint of approval in his voice. It's important to maintain one's routine in trying times. I sat down at the table across from him. I could feel the video playing behind my eyes, the shove, the splash, the cold, patient waiting. I could hear his voice in my head. I did what was necessary. "Has there been any word from Leo?" I asked, looking directly at my father. His face was a perfect, unreadable mask. "No. Not yet. He will return when his tantrum is over." He was a phenomenal liar. But I had seen the truth. I had the proof in my pocket, in the cloud in the mail. I was no longer the naive younger brother. I was the archivist of his sins. The keeper of his downfall. The scandal was not over. My brother's disappearance was just the beginning. Now it was my turn. I had to decide what to do with the poison. Do I release it, destroying my family, my mother, my own name, in the pursuit of justice for a man I never knew and a brother I might never see again? Or do I hold it, using it as a shield, living in this house of horrors, a prisoner of the secret, forever haunted by what I knew? I looked at my father, the man who had given me life and had taken another's without a flicker of remorse. He smiled at me, a thin, proprietary smile. It was the smile of a monster who believed he was untouchable. His last words to Leo, the ones from the recording, haunted me now as much as they must have haunted my brother. "I will make you disappear." It was a promise he had made to Leo, and now it was an unspoken threat to me. I picked up my coffee cup, my hand steady. The secret I wished I never knew was now my only weapon and my heaviest cross. The war for the soul of the Sterling family had just begun, and I was the last soldier standing on the battlefield.